without ever having that hard conversation and communicating that, they
Right.
might never come to that conclusion. And then they're just thinking, oh, like, are they really here for the long term? What do they actually want? What are our goals? How committed are we to
Yeah.
each other?
All right, everybody. Welcome back to the STAG Project Podcast. We're here with episode 7, soon to be revealed what we're going to be talking about. Before I reveal what we're going to be talking about, I would like to introduce our special new guest, my friend Connor over here. Connor, if you want to introduce yourself, say a little bit about yourself, tell the people.
How's it going? I'm a close friend of Seb's, also in aerospace engineering,
Yes,
Air Force RTC.
we both suffered through that.
Yes, we
Unfortunately.
both suffered through that. Yeah, that's pretty much all.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Yep, that's fair. Yep. All right, guys. So today we're gonna be talking about commitment, and you're like, "Whoa, commitment! What type of commitment?" Because we can think of commitment in different ways, and we're actually gonna cover these different ways. First, we're gonna stick to kind of what the meaning of commitment is, and then after that, we'll kind of tie into commitment in relationships, and then at the end, we will allude to the next episode. But I'll save that as a surprise. So, buckle in and get ready for the episode, everyone. So, jumping right on into the meaning of commitment. What does it mean to be committed? Connor, if you want to tackle this first, and I'll put my opinion into it. But to you, what is commitment? What does it mean to be committed?
I guess for me personally, being committed to something is just really going after like a certain goal or objective, um, oftentimes relentlessly, and pursuing that because it has some value to you or just in general. Um, this can be applied like to really anything, like areas of like fitness, mental health. Um, I don't know, you name it. Like even relationships too, as we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, no, and I agree, especially fitness. We talk about fitness a lot here. I talk about the gym in almost every single episode. And I agree, like, it takes a level of commitment. And this is kind of my definition, my meaning of commitment. It takes a level of commitment to wake up every morning and hit the gym. And say you do it like 5 days a week or whatever. People don't just start doing that because whatever, they make a mental click. They have a mental conversation with themselves and they're like, I'm going to do this. And they give themselves a why. I think that's an important aspect of commitment is giving yourself a why. So say, it's someone who's not as physically fit. And then they tell themselves, okay, I need to wake up every morning, go to the gym, and then run after I go to the gym. I'm doing this because I want to become better. And then, it might take them a little bit to build that habit to start going to the gym. They might go like, they say they're going to go 5 days a week, and then they go like 3 days, 1 week. And I think an important aspect of commitment too is remaining persistent. Because if they only do those 3 days, and then the next week they do 2, and then the next week 1, they end up dropping, and
turning that into a habit almost.
Yeah, it's like turning it into a habit. And if they're not consistent and committed to what they want, and it's like you said, like it's doing what you can, like getting after it essentially. And if they're not getting after it, well, what's the point? They're gonna lose that momentum. So.
Right. When I think of commitment too, I think it can easily be conflated with discipline. For example, like guys like David Goggins, Jocko Willink, they're always waking up. Even Cameron Haynes, they're waking up like every morning, challenging themselves to the extreme, and they just do it over and over and over again. And to me, that's just a certain level of commitment and self-discipline that is like hard for me to just imagine at this point in my lifestyle. Like, yes, we're getting up every single day.
Yeah. Going to the gym.
Yeah, go to the gym, studying hard.
But that's enough.
We're not perfect by any means, but
Yeah,
we're still building our credibility. But
right.
These guys are the real deal. Running like ultra marathons and
all that crazy
doing
crap.
Incredible feats that like right now seem pretty crazy, but for them it's like a day-to-day life basis.
And let's try to think back, like I know personally, like I read David Goggins' Can't Hurt Me, so like I know his story on how he got there, but just think right now what we're going through, like obviously, like you say, we don't have. I mean, personally, I don't think we have the time to be running and training for
No,
ultra
no, yeah.
marathons and all that kind of stuff. But like, think about back to when it all started. They started on a slow grind. They maybe did 5 miles a week or something like that. And that's it's like kind of like what we're doing. We're at our start right now. So I just think it's important to understand where you start. You know?
Right. And for David too, like I think this is also an interesting idea, but a lot of times those people that start from nothing end up making so much of that nothing into a success
Yes.
because they have
Yes.
nothing to lose at that point. You know, you look at David Goggins, who's 300 pounds,
Dude, his
extremely
life
overweight.
was fucked.
Yeah, his
Yeah, his
life
life
was,
was
yeah,
screwed.
yeah.
Like all the problems he had with his dad.
He was
Like
like a cockroach worker,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like
you
for
would
pests, right?
yeah, it was
Yeah,
something like that. Like you would it was like kind of like an exterminator type thing for like
yeah,
restaurants,
yeah.
like fast food restaurants and stuff
Bad
like that. Like
family life, but like
yeah.
instead of just like looking at that, just being like, yeah, my life sucks. Like he was able to turn that around,
And
start working.
I think that's beautiful. You know, I think not enough people nowadays they do that. They like to have kind of like a victim mindset, and then they don't want to work towards being that best version of themselves. They take, oh, I had a bad childhood, like I had a rough time growing up, so like I'm not gonna work for it. Like I'm destined to be like this. And I think that's really sad. That is really sad to me. Like, why don't you use that energy and turn it around like these great people did? Like these, like you said, these people had nothing, and now they have everything and more.
Right. There's a few things we can actually expand from that too. So, like for example, if there's people like David Goggins or like people that just have like really messed up lives and they're working off of that hate, eventually that's going to burn out too, and then they're going to have to find another why. You know, that
Yeah,
might stay with them for years, and they
right.
might, you know, have a lot of resentment towards certain people or, um, you know, certain experiences that they've had, but eventually they're going to have to move on from that and find a stronger why to keep them going because in the end, at least this is just my personal like belief, like discipline and commitment is so much stronger and more important than motivation because every day you're not
Yes.
going to be motivated to get up. I mean,
Yeah. And that's the same thing.
David is.
It goes with inspiration as well. Commitment and inspiration. You know, like you said, you're not going to be motivated every day. You can watch like a motivational video before you go on a run, but and you say you do that for like 2 weeks. On your third week, you're going to be like, this isn't really doing anything, right? Like it's just going to feel like something you're repeating. You're doing it just to do it, right? It's not actually giving you any value. So I agree with you. I agree with you. I think, people they have to find their whys, and I think that hate and the anger towards that they have towards the experiences or the people, I think it's important because it's kind of like it's the first, how do you say, it's like the first thing they use to kind of push themselves. And I agree, like if they keep using it, eventually it's going to run out and they could burn out and explode. That's the way I see it. But I think it's important that they use it to push themselves in the right direction, because that's what counts. When you start moving in that right direction, after that, then you slowly start to find other reasons why.
Right. And I think some people think that really they're going to push themselves too much in the beginning,
Yeah.
but it's actually a lot harder to do than they think, you know, to like
Yeah.
even just physically
Like working to
exhaust
exhaustion.
yourself.
Yeah,
Yeah.
working to exhaustion. Like
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are scared. Like they don't know their bodily limits, so they don't even test it.
Right.
And I don't know, what is it like when you're super tired. I read something. It's like you're only using like 40% of your body. Well, once you're
Oh
like
yeah,
super
40%
exhausted.
rule. Yeah, I
Yeah, yeah.
think that was also like something David touched on too, you know,
Hmm.
mind over matter. You can
Definitely. Yeah.
always push yourself further. And like one of the nuances with just like commitment, like hard work, is that with like influence culture, I don't know, you might see that video of just someone like working out, like sick music in the background, like some nice edits.
Yeah.
But like in reality, all the work is done and oftentimes in just like silence and like alone, you
Right.
know, in
There's
the
no
early
reason.
mornings, late
Yeah.
nights.
There's no reason to like, I guess, be recording that kind of stuff. I mean, I guess it's they have their content creators on stuff. Sure, but
Right, right. Like I think there's definitely a limit to
yes.
like
Yeah.
showing that. You know, like
Because then
David Goggins and like Cameron Hames, Cameron Haynes, they're not like posting it every single day just like for like views and like attention.
Right.
Like I think they're trying to motivate people and show people like, hey, this is like I do these difficult tasks,
You can do
challenges
them
every
too.
day.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you can do
yeah.
them too.
I came from this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. I mean, a lot of my like feed on like TikTok and Instagram, like reels and all that kind of stuff, is people with like gym edits, like short
Right.
10-second, 15-second gym edits. And I think it's a little oversaturated because people that want to start, they kind of see that and they're like, oh, it's going to be that easy. Like, I'm going to be like that in a couple months. Realistically, like working out and getting fit is a very, very hard journey. And it goes way more than just going to the gym and showing up. You have to give your absolute everything every single time you go to the gym. You have to make sure you're eating right. You have to make sure you're sleeping right. There are 1,000 things that go into you becoming that best physical version of yourself. So I think that's important to understand. And, you know, going back to like commitment and its meaning, I think something really important, and I might have already touched on this, is consistency. Like, if you're not being consistent, then clearly you're just not committed to what you're doing.
Right. Yeah, some people even just like again on the topic of just like physical fitness, like you don't have to have an hour, 2 hour long workout to get a workout in. Even just like burpees for 5 minutes or just like going on a run for 10 minutes. Like that can be a good workout just in and of itself. Planks, like push ups, just like people oftentimes just make a lot of excuses. Oh, I
Yes.
don't have enough time. Like,
I know the proper
I'm very
equipment.
busy. Yeah, I
I
don't have the
like
proper equipment.
your
Like, really?
body is a great
Yeah,
tool.
you don't
You
need that
can,
much. You
yeah,
can do a lot just, yeah, just with your own body too.
do like a
Um,
hundred push-ups or something like that. Rest a little bit.
do you
Yeah.
think it's possible to be overcommitted though to something?
Um, let's see. Possibly, if it gets to the point where it impairs almost everything in your life, where like you're blindsiding the really important things, like I don't know, for example, I guess you can use, say you're really committed to, finding like a new something new in like let's say the aerospace field, like that's relevant to us. Say like that's all you do. You work 24/7, like you're neglecting, say you have like a family or something, you're neglecting your family, your friends, the social aspect, and then you start neglecting your physical aspect and then your mental aspect, like all
Right.
that. Once you get to the stage where the pillars that keep you up, once those pillars start deteriorating, that's when I think you can get too committed. And you can take a step back at that point and just reevaluate, like, yes, this is something I want, and yes, I want to be committed to it, but is it actually doing me any good if it's destroying the rest of my life?
Right. Especially when it's like hurting your other goals too. Um, or like even just long term goals that you might have that you haven't created yet necessarily. Um,
Yeah, you shouldn't have just like one goal you're going after. I think you're kind of like, you're giving yourself tunnel vision off the bat. Like you should
right.
want to expand in many different things, but
Yeah, I think a
honestly,
lot of people will sacrifice that short term gratification for the long term end goal, where they're giving in to just like social media, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, you name it, just like wasting your time.
and
Yeah,
everything, yeah.
I
And
mean
they
time.
could be doing something else. And honestly, like
Yeah,
I don't. People say like, "Oh, it's only 5 minutes." Like, only on here for 5 minutes. Like,
it
what
hurts. It
what could you
hurts.
be doing in 5 minutes? Like,
It
think you
hurts.
can think of a million things. I could read 5 pages in 5 minutes.
Well,
Say for
even
example.
like think about this too. Like if you're even just looking at like your phone for 5 minutes through like 12 times throughout your day, that's an hour that you've just wasted too. So
Yeah, that's an entire hour of the day, and you're not up 24 hours of the day. You're sleeping for 8, hopefully, and you have school, class, all that kind of stuff, and whatever work.
right.
So
And I think this is something interesting to think about too. When you're really committed to a goal, sometimes you might have to reevaluate that. And if you're not necessarily achieving it, and most things aren't going to be short term result, instant gratification. You're going to need to work at it for a while. Stay committed, stay disciplined. Motivation is important, but not as much as commitment and discipline. Um,
yeah, no, for sure, for sure. And I think that especially comes true when you're talking about relationships. It's actually the next topic we're going to dive into. All right, so the second segment of this episode on commitment. We're going to be talking about commitment in relationships. So, uh, staying faithful, that kind of stuff. Like how can one be committed in a relationship? And I think this is a very important topic to talk about now in today's society because we don't see a lot of commitment between two partners. So yes, this is about relationships, but this is also how do you stay committed to the people around you. That's more of what it's also entails. So Connor, if you want to give your insight, what do you think is how do you actually stay committed to the people around you? And this could be friends, family, significant others, whatever.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I think it's first good to really evaluate what a relationship is. When I think of relationship, I think of, the trust between two people,
Yes. Yes.
mutual respect, how much you listen to one another, and then the influence you have over one another. So that can be, separated like a lot of ways, but influence, are you peers? Is one person a boss, one person subordinate? Do you treat them like such? Trust and respect, they're pretty self-explanatory, but it again comes down to commitment and just consistency. Are you performing like on a consistent basis where everything you're doing allows the other person to trust you, to respect your decisions, um, and they have no reason to, become insecure or um, start to falter in that respect, and for your relationship to deteriorate
Right.
ultimately.
Do you think that also plays into the actions? So like, um, you're saying like you respect their actions, but you yourself also take respectable actions on for their sake.
Oh,
Do you?
100%. Yeah, I think ultimately, like, intent, you can always smell intent. Um, so just being genuine, I think, is part of that trust and
Genuine.
respect.
Okay, yeah, no, that's
Respect part, like, in your consistency and your commitment, are you being genuine? You're not doing things that are fake, like, just to um,
kind of
have
like
that perception
right.
from other people, or doing things for the ego boost.
Yeah, like
Always
to
staying
appeal to their ego. I was
right,
gonna say that like that's yeah. You don't want to be that type of person. I get that exactly. Yeah, yeah.
right.
So why do you think so many people nowadays struggle with commitment?
I think a lot of people struggle with commitment, partly from like insecurity in themselves or like others. Like it might just be easier to um, have a lot of different relationships or like partners within a short period of time than to stay committed to one person and
Mhm.
really try to make it work and make it last.
I think a lot of that has to do with fear. I think people are scared. They're scared of the idea of commitment first and foremost. I'm gonna get that out there. I've heard so many people. A lot of people's excuses for not wanting to be in a relationship is the commitment aspect. And yes, I agree. Commitment can be scary, but it can also be a really beautiful thing if you apply it correctly. But yeah, fear I think is the biggest aspect, and that's what causes all the insecurities. People are either someone who's not in a significant other type of relationship. They might be too scared to go talk to someone or whatever. They're not committed to going after what they want. That's just like one example, but in a relationship, fear can come in this like, oh, you don't want to communicate something to your partner because you don't want to make them mad or you don't want to make them upset or whatever. But sometimes like it's you need to have that hard conversation.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah, I'm a strong believer that tackling those hard conversations are super important. Whether that's in interpersonal relationships or outside. Always like hitting the hard conversations are really important because you're never really going to break past that barrier of genuineness if you're never having those conversations to begin with. Obviously, there's a time and a
right.
place too,
Right. No, yeah, of
but
course. But there's yeah, not having those conversations. I think that's what really it bottlenecks and kills the essential communication you need between two people. And yeah, it's gonna be uncomfortable, but like nothing good comes from just staying in your comfort zone and not growing and learning from it. You have to be uncomfortable, especially when it comes to, like social interactions and that kind of stuff. Like,
right. And the fear part that you were talking about earlier, it just made me think like I think oftentimes with two people in a relationship, there might be one person who or maybe even both, that think like, oh, I'd like to settle down in a couple of years too, but without ever having that hard conversation and communicating that, they
Right.
might never come to that conclusion. And then they're just thinking, oh, like, are they really here for the long term? What do they actually want? What are our goals? How committed are we to
Yeah.
each other?
And
So,
that's actually interesting you bring that up. I actually have a personal example. I know a personal family friend who these two people they dated for I think it was like 12 years. Like dated. Like they didn't get married or anything. And obviously
did
like
they
they
break up in between at all, or was it pretty
no,
consistent
it
for
was
those?
all consistent all 12 years. And I find that so interesting because it's like you guys were obviously committed to each other and maybe there could have been other things, but they eventually did get married. I'm not I to me personally I don't understand why
Right?
wait,
Yeah.
and I think it's because they didn't have that conversation. I think they just wanted to stay young too. Like that was probably one of the aspects of it. And they didn't want to like do the whole I'm getting married so I'm getting old type of thing.
Right. I wonder if there was a breakdown in communication, or
I think that's what it
if
was.
there was
I
just
think
like, financial like reasons too or
that
whatnot. I don't know.
knowing them
Maybe
personally, there wasn't any financial issues.
existential
Yeah, I
reasons.
think it was. I genuinely believe it was an avoidance of just having that like, why don't we just get married? Conversation like they've already been together, they were committed, and then they ended up having kids and everything.
Right.
So,
And again, like if you're asking that question too, like, should we get married? Do I see a future with this person?
hmm
If you're asking yourself that, then is that a good thing or is that a bad thing? I think that's something interesting to think
well,
about too.
I think it depends what stage you are with that person. If you've been dating them for well over a year or two, and you ask yourself, "Oh, do I really see myself with this person?" That might be a cause for caution. But
Right.
say you guys are like 6 months into dating, something like that, and you start thinking about the future seriously, because I think the common threshold is like 1.5 years to 2.5 years. That's when people usually decide to get engaged. So I think at like that 6 month marker, and obviously you don't want to just waste your time, right? Well, you should want to date with the intent to marry. So I think it is important to really ask yourself and look and analyze like, is this someone I see myself spending the rest of my life with? Can I actually, be with this person?
Well, yeah, and we were talking about commitment and social media a little bit earlier too.
Mhm.
Like, what's your personal opinion, I guess, on like liking someone else's, photos or pictures or
As an,
videos, or even following certain people
I
too on
think I think
social
that's
media?
an interesting thing. So, question for that, just so I can provide a good answer. Do you mean like celebrities or like people in your direct life? Because
I
I
guess
have a different
both. I
answer.
guess both.
Okay. All right. So, me personally, like I think if like I personally don't care that much. Like if I'm following someone and someone say I have a significant other and they're like, "Oh, unfollow that person." Like I don't really see it as that big a deal. I'll just unfollow them because I don't really care that much at the end of the day. But I do think it's a bit controlling, especially if it's someone like a celebrity. Like I'm never gonna meet that person, and I mean, as long as you're not. It also depends. Like, why are you following? What is the purpose behind you following that person?
Right.
If they're like your favorite actor or something, I think that's perfectly fine. But if you're
Ryan
following
Reynolds.
them,
No.
what?
So Ryan Reynolds.
Yeah. But yeah, if you're following someone just to like look at them, like lustfully, say for example, like then I think that's bad. Like, why would you want to do that? You'd have a significant other.
Right, right. Yeah, that's the line I draw too. And yeah, I like to think, I mean, personally, like if you're going to do something, like make a decision and you would be uncomfortable doing it in front of your partner or in front of other people, then why would you be making that same decision when you're alone? So I
Right.
think it's something to think about too, just because like just holding yourself accountable. Um,
In
I
all
think is very
aspects.
important. Yeah.
In all aspects. Yeah, I agree with that.
21:43.
Thank you.
Siri wanted to interject in the podcast. Well, love to see that.
Siri
Love to
did
see
too, but
it. Yeah, but yeah, going back to it and finishing that question too, it also depends on people that are kind of close to your life. Like if it's like college friends and stuff like that. I personally don't see a purpose in unfollowing them because like especially if it's people like us in ROTC, like we're always seeing each other 24/7. Like there's no real. purpose. And I think this actually, it's funny. I think this is a great segue into back into insecurity. Like, if that, why would that your significant other
Be bothered by that.
so much? Maybe there is a reason to be bothered a little bit, but why? If it gets to the point where they're fighting you over it, like,
Right, and that's the hard like nuance there because they're being insecure about, something, and then also but also on the flip side, like should you really be doing something like that too? Like do
yes,
you have a right to be insecure, or is that really just showing like lack of confidence and
right. And I think, kind of like we explained, it really just depends on the situation. Like,
right.
it depends. I mean, why are you following that person? If you guys are just friends, like you're in the same program, and that's the only thing that you see from it, then that's fine. But if you see them as something more, like you may think of like pursuing them or something like that, then that's when you need to reevaluate. And you're like, they have a reason to be insecure. Like this
Right.
person.
It just bothers me when I see people that are in relationships that will say like, "Oh my gosh, this, so and so's really hot," or like, "Oh my gosh, check out this photo," or "Check out this." Like, it just bothers me because I know that the person in the relationship, I mean, may or may not care, but at the end of the day, it's just unfaithful and
Yeah, why are you
uh,
doing that? Like, again, it
yeah.
goes back to the purpose. Like, and if you're really committed to your one
But I
person,
think just
like,
that instant gratification, or like just the easiness of just following that person, or just like swiping along on social media, is just it's just a lot easier than actually establishing
a
a
connection.
consistent relationship
Yeah,
and building something up
yeah.
from
I
nothing really.
think I think like online relationships, online dating apps, all that crap, it doesn't work. I mean, unless you guys are meeting consistently in person, like it doesn't work because you don't through a phone you can't connect to someone.
No.
You need to be face to face, and you need to have conversations with them. That's how you connect with people. That's I agree with that. I agree with that.
Right. I again, like on the topic of being overcommitted to, like I think there's a fine line um of spending too much time with one another too. Like I think there's a fine line in the aspect that you need to make sure you're balancing your goals and
Yes.
your like
Yeah.
your priorities in life too, as well as that other person. You're not too focused on what they're thinking or um, their life than you are on your own, and making sure that you're doing what you need to do
Yeah.
to
Of
bring to the relationship, because in
course.
the
Yeah.
end, I don't know, I think I've heard this um, somewhere, but relationships aren't 50-50. They're 100-100
Yes.
on
I
both
love that.
sides.
I love that. It's good. Yeah. I saw that in a video. I think like last summer, and I always thought it. Like I always
I
said
thought
it.
that was interesting. Yeah.
I always said to myself it was 50-50.
Right.
But when I saw that, I was like, wow, that changed my
Yeah,
perspective.
it
It
did.
is 100.
Right.
Each side has to be giving their own. I think, and going back, I think it's really important to take care of yourself when
Right.
you're in a relationship,
Right.
because if you can't hold yourself up, by like if you can't personally sustain yourself, how can you sustain your partner? Say
Right.
like say they're down.
Oh, yeah, that's a huge one. Because if and there's that like balance of like helping out someone else, helping yourself, um, and like going after your goals. So like, how much are you being a burden to someone else? And you shouldn't have to feel like that in a relationship too. You don't want that other person feeling like they're a burden. But there's an aspect where you have to make sure that you're mentally okay enough to help them out, and they're not
Yes.
draining too much of your energy, your time, away from your own personal goals and personal health.
Yes. Yeah. So I think it's important to analyze all those things before you really fully commit yourself to one person. It's important to
Yeah,
commit.
just set those
Yeah,
boundaries
set
too.
those boundaries. Commit yourself to yourself first, and then once you feel like you're in a good enough position, then I think it's okay to start going to like the dating pool. I think that's another thing too. I think people just they want a relationship so bad. They want to be with someone like they're not comfortable with themselves yet. And it's like if you're not comfortable with yourself, like how are you gonna be comfortable with someone else? You know what I mean? You gotta find that.
Right. And how about like those people that are so committed to getting the guy or getting the girl, um,
I think.
but that other person doesn't always reciprocate
Yeah.
that back.
I mean, I think for me personally, like if I think persistence is good until like they tell you explicitly no, like they're like, no, this isn't gonna work. Then I think personally, I just back away. Like that's my like closure. I'm done there. But like, if you guys are talking or whatever or friends and you see something, I think it's good to be persistent and trying to go after that person
Right.
until you get that like definite no. I think it's like it's fair game to you know. I don't think it's like what you were talking about, giving up and was
Pivoting.
it, what was that?
Yeah, giving up versus just like pivoting and like going back at it.
Yes, yeah, yeah, and quitting as well.
Yeah.
Like, yeah,
Yeah, it's okay to quit in the instance and pivot around that and find a new
but
approach.
never give up.
Never give up.
Yes, yeah. All right, I think that's gonna wrap it up for the second portion of this episode. We're gonna move on to the third portion, which I told you guys is a surprise, and we're gonna hit you with that right now. All right, and so to wrap up this episode on commitment, we're going to talk about actionable steps you guys can take to stay committed to whatever you want, goals, relationships, whatever it may be. Um, Something important to keep in mind, we're going to take this segment and look at it from a perspective of someone who like really struggles to stay committed. So Connor, quickly run me through what would you say are some steps you can take to really get committed to something?
Again, like I think it's just really important to focus on your why. In the beginning, like motivation is going to be that starter, like that flame, but really you're going to have to develop that and really mold that into something that's going to keep you committed in the long run. Um, and at first, it's going to be hard. I personally think the best way is just to jump right in. Now, I'm not saying like if you haven't really run that much before or worked out or really done committed to anything to just go.
Don't run 20
Yeah,
miles in
20
a day.
miles in that
Don't do
first
that.
day. Yeah,
Yeah.
do not do that. But slowly, progressively overload yourself each week, each day. Work a little harder. Make sure you're balancing, everything else that's going on, giving yourself proper rest and fuel and nutrition. But for me, just jumping right in and then realizing, hey, this is what hard feels like at this moment. Um, this is the hardest that it's going to get right now, and that it's not so bad. And then that starts to build levels on levels where
It's like
at first, yeah, running those
it
three
builds that
miles.
callus, that
Yeah,
mental callus. You're
right.
just like, yeah, this sucks right now, but like I'm gonna get past this. Like I'm gonna get through this, and say you're doing this for like what, a 5 mile run, and then you do a 7 mile. This sucks right now. This is the absolute worst. It sucks, but I'm gonna get past it. So then you keep building that callus, that callus, that callus. And I think that's something David Goggins he talks about in
Right.
his book. It's called The Calloused Mind. That's that chapter. And something else that he talks about that I think is really important when it comes to commitment is the 1 second rule. And that's the mental conversation you have with yourself before you do something. So like, and I'm gonna use a really good example that a lot of people they fail at. I feel like you get up early, right? And you're laying in bed and your alarm's going off. You have the option to hit snooze or turn off your alarm.
Oh, yeah.
And it's that 1 second in your mind, like it's the very beginning of that conversation that you have yourself that dictates what's gonna happen. If you're like, oh, I could probably do 5 more minutes or something like that, you're whatever you had in your plans to do that morning, you're more than likely not gonna do that. You have to be able to tell yourself, all right, it's time to get up, it's time to get to work. You shut off that alarm, jump out of bed, and you get to what you're doing. That's how you become committed to something. It's by having that mental conversation with yourself. And in that 1 second, it's a split second. It's hard. It's hard. It's really hard to just tell yourself, no, I'm gonna do it. This is gonna suck.
It'd
But
be
you
nice to stay
have
under
to.
those covers, right?
It would
Warm
be, yeah,
bed,
yeah.
yeah.
You want to, and then that's the interesting part. You want to be in that comfort. You don't wanna go
That's where you
lift.
got to get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yes, yeah, yeah. I was gonna say you don't want to go bench 225. You don't want to go squat 315. Like it's too hard. It's too early. Like No, no.
Right, and
Get up and get
failing
after it.
over and over and over again. Really,
Failure
that's
is
the only
part
way.
of the process.
Yeah.
It's part of it. It's, people really focus on, and this comes from Atomic Habits. People focus on the end, like, result, and they never think about the journey. And that's like I've mentioned it in various other episodes, but it's the journey is what counts, not the end goal. Because who knows? Like, life is never guaranteed. You never know if you're gonna make it to that end goal you set for yourself. Just
Right.
enjoy the ride.
And maybe that could be a great topic for the future,
For
of
sure.
just like a growth mindset in general, because a lot of people that are fixed in their mindset are focused on just that performance or that result. And they're not focused on the journey, the process of actually learning
Yeah,
and growing through that.
we actually talked about that with Don in our mindset episode. We talked about like the differences between fixed and growth mindsets.
Right.
And a lot of people, they stay like stagnated, and that's not what you want to aim for, you
Right.
know. So it's really important to just take action. That's where it all starts. That's where commitment is born, when you start taking action. So something I want you guys to do, just going forward, if you want to stay committed to something, you start taking action. Don't overthink it. We talked about that in our last episode. Don't overthink. You take action. And even if you fail at it, you know what? You failed and you learn from it. Make sure you learn. You learn from it. And the next time you do it, you may fail again. You may not. So you'll never know unless you take that action. That's how you get committed.
Right, and have gratitude in those small accomplishments,
Yeah.
and pride too. Not too much, but even if it's just something as simple as like, hey, I got out of bed on time today.
And if it's something you struggle with, like,
Right,
applaud yourself. Like, you
right,
got out of bed. So
right,
just just take action. That's all commitment comes down to. And again, like we discussed today, in relationships, we talked a lot about like fitness goals and all that kind of stuff. It all comes down to just taking that first step.
and I think there's that event horizon too, where you get to a certain point, and you know that you either have to go all in or go all out. So that can be with like a couple of things, like even just like, again, going back to fitness, like if you're hitting a PR or a squat, there's no going halfway or like giving 50%. It's
It
all or
doesn't count.
nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You either asked to grass or it didn't
Right,
count. Yeah.
right.
So
And within RTC too, just even like going for like certain jobs or positions or like slots,
you
like
need to make sure you put all your effort in.
RPA, pilot
Yeah.
slots, right? Um, at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, it's all or nothing. So you can't really be half committed, because if you get stuck with a job you don't like, well,
You're stuck with it.
you're
Like
stuck with
that's
it,
just
or
where it is.
else you're getting kicked out. Really,
Yeah. I
yeah,
mean, and you don't want to be that guy that's just like, you didn't get a job you want, but you don't want to be that guy who's just
right,
kind of a crutch on the entire organization.
right,
You want to make sure you're pulling your weight. So, all right, guys, that's gonna wrap it up for today's episode on commitment. We love you guys. Thank you guys so much for tuning into these episodes and watching them. This is all for you guys to make sure you guys are growing and becoming better people. Make sure you guys are staying tuned and updated on our Instagram. We'll be starting to post on TikTok soon as summer rolls around. Sorry, it's been a little bit hectic with classes, and Connor here can attest to that. But we really appreciate you guys, checking out these videos. Just make sure you guys, you share this with your friends, your family, and really get the STAG project out there so we can help as many people as possible. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll catch you in the next one.